What's up, y'all? Good afternoon, and welcome to the Brown Mama Weekly Message. My name is Muffy Mendoza. I'm the founder of Brown Mamas. I'm the executive director and founder of Brown Mamas and Pittsburgh Brown Mamas and all of that jazz. So, first thing I want to do is just make sure that I'm hosting a watch party um, in my groups. I'm pretty sure I'm sharing this in my groups, but I'm going to go ahead and start the watch party just in case. I want to make sure that this goes live in my group because I promised some of the mamas that I was going to do a live about this particular topic. So I want to make sure that I do that. So just give me a second to see if I can do that. All right, there we go. Let's see. All right. I'm not sure. If you are watching this from the Pittsburgh Brown Mamas group and you can start a watch party for it for me, that would be awesome because obviously I can't do it. So, anyway, welcome to the Brown Mama Weekly Message. It's me, Muffy Mendoza, executive director and founder of Brown Mamas. Um, I've been wanting to talk about this subject for a very long time, which is sexual dysfunction in the Black family and the ways in which it manifests itself. Hey, Kia. Kia, can you start a watch party of this video in the Pittsburgh Brown Mamas group if possible? That's one of my besties. Hey, boo. Um, so I've been wanting to talk about this subject for quite some time because I think it's a really important subject to talk about. It's come up in the Pittsburgh Brown Mamas quite frequently in the form of talking about slut shaming, in the form of talking about that movie Cuties that just came out and the sexual nature of it in terms of how it is displaying young Black girls. Um, it's come up a lot, and I feel like it's something that we need to dissect. I feel like it's something that we need to talk about from a very and understand. We need to first understand is a very complex issue. It's not an issue that is, hey, Nicole, it's not an issue that we should take lightly. It's also not something that we should just gloss over as if it is a one-time instance and doesn't have a historical perspective in our community. So I really wanted to take out some time to just talk about that. And I think first, one of the things that bothers me, well, I think we're getting here. I think we are beginning to look at Black issues more from a perspective of how are we how have we historically been affected by this issue and where are we right now, and then what is kind of the ripple effect of this issue into the future if it continues to go about unchecked. And so I first want to begin from that perspective of understanding sexual dysfunction as something that we've been dealing with for a long time, especially as people who were brought to this country enslaved. So I think the first thing we need to talk about is the founding of this country, or not founding because this country has been here, but the founding of how Europeans, Western Europeans, found this country and the sexual dysfunction that existed in that culture prior to it becoming our culture. Because we have to recognize that this was not always a culture, that the Western culture, the Western American culture, is not necessarily what isn't a Black culture. It is a culture that was developed by people who lived in Europe and then transported to American soil. And when we were transported to American soil forcefully, we were forced to adopt this culture. So I think one of the first things that we need to understand when we're talking about sexual dysfunction is why we adopted this culture. Why you can go to Brazil and see the same sexual dysfunction. You can go to Caribbean and see the same sexual dysfunction. You can go anywhere where Black people are and white people are, really, mesh together and see this form of sexual dysfunction. And it has a lot to do with the founding of European culture on sexual dysfunction. European culture was very wanton in its display of pedophilia. It was very wanton in its display of prostitution. It was very wanton in its display of all types of sexual deviances, whether it be bestiality, whether it be the use of women as toys and tools. Do we know that some of the first slaves on American soil were actually Irish women? They imported Irish women to America for no other reason than to sexually exploit them, to put them in brothels, and to force them to have children. So I think we have to really begin to look at the sexual dysfunction that exists at America's core before we can begin to look at how African Americans in particular are basically responding to the power structure that exists in. Hey, what's up, Stan? What's up? I ain't see you in a month of Sundays. While we need to begin to understand how sexual dysfunction exists at its core in this country, and then we can begin to understand the ripple effect that it is having on us right now and how it is going to affect our children in the future. So that's first and foremost. I think we need to center ourselves in that place where we have the understanding that Greek culture, French culture, Roman Catholic culture has a basis of sexual dysfunction. And these are all ways of being that we've had to take on as African people. One of the things that we also need to begin to understand is the formation of Black culture underneath the guise of the sexual dysfunction that exists in Western culture. So one of the things that a lot of Black people don't know is that Black people in America are bred unlike any other people, unlike any other Black people who were affected by the Ma'afa or the transatlantic slave trade. So the transatlantic slave trade, I can't remember exactly what year it ended, but it ended in the early 1600s. Or was it the early 1600s? I want to make sure I get this correctly. I think it was the late 1700s to beginning of the 1800s. But what we're going to say is that it ended at some point. At some point, the transatlantic slave trade ended. But when it ended, it ended for America, but it didn't end for anybody else. So places like Brazil, the Caribbean islands were still importing Africans from the continent as enslaved people to do forced free labor. But in America, America stopped doing the transatlantic slave trade. So that speaks volumes to why Black people in America are so different from Black people in the Caribbean. We're different from Black people in Brazil. We're different from Black people in Britain. We're just different. We're not the same. You can go to Black countries in South America and the Caribbean, and it's almost the same culture minus a few idiosyncrasies. But when you come to America, it's a complete different revision of the culture, of Black culture, of African culture, because we were bred. Literally, once they stopped importing Africans from the African continent, they just started breeding us. And what happens when you breed a dog? You get consistency, which is why people pay more for bred dogs than they're going to pay for essentially a mutt. Because you're going to get some consistency in the bloodline. You're going to get some consistency in the DNA. You're going to get consistency in the action of that particular being. So we need to begin to understand from that perspective why African people have adapted to the sexual dysfunction of Europeans in a way that other cultures may not have, and many other ways. And it has a lot to do with the fact that we were bred. There are so many layers to what African people experienced during slavery, from the mass separation of Black men from Black children. That happened all over the world in terms of Black people being enslaved, African people being enslaved, but it didn't happen. The what's the word I'm looking for? The strain in which it put on Black families was a lot different because we didn't know any better. We assumed that this was the way that things were supposed to be because we had no outside influence. It's like if you have a dog and that dog is caged. And then every day you're bringing in new dogs that didn't come from caged environments. Eventually, they're going to have an effect on the dog who's caged. The dog who's caged is going to say, I don't need to be caged anymore. But if all the dogs are in cages and they never see that there's any other way to do this, there's no other way to live their lives, then the outcome is much more perverse. So first, let's start from there. The second thing we need to begin to recognize is that sexual dysfunction has a lot to do with the fact that we've taken the ritual out of sexual behavior and activity. So not only are we operating in a sexually deviant society where sexual deviance is the norm, where sexual deviance is the thing that we've rooted and come from, where sexual deviance is the thing that is glorified, but we've also taken the idea that sexual identity, sexual behaviors deserve to be ritualized. And when you hear the word ritual, what you need to hear is the word routine. It should be placed inside of a routine. And here's why. Because first of all, let's go into science a little bit here. So the physical act of having sex is like no other act that we can engage in on earth. There is scientific proof that when a person has an ejaculation or an orgasm, their brain is literally firing on all cylinders. Your brain is ignited in a way that does not exist at all, period, on this earth. Your hippocampus is ignited, your frontal lobe is ignited, your cortex is ignited. All the parts of your brain, once you are in a moment of orgasm or ejaculation, are ignited. That doesn't happen to you any other time in doing any other thing in your life. The closest you can get to it is actually playing music. So it is an extremely powerful, energetic exchange. So that means something that powerful needs to have a basis for existence. It needs to have a ritual and a routine that is put around it that says, this is when I am going to allow myself to indulge in this high level of brain frequency and activity. And if your brain is operating, y'all can look this information up. None of this is like rocket science or anything that's hidden. If you want to look up the history of Greek, Roman, French, sexual dysfunction, you can look it up. It's out there. You can read it in a book. You can watch some shows like the Rome, Borges, Peaky Blinders. They all have that in there. If you want to look up about this brain activity, you can look up the limbic system. You can look up what happens to your brain when you have an orgasm. All this stuff is on YouTube. You can look it up. This ain't nothing that I made up. So it needs to be, because this thing is happening to you, there's multiple things happening while your body is having an orgasm and ejaculation. The first thing is happening is that there is a DNA exchange happening. What is our DNA? We know that there's a DNA exchange happening because when you have sex, you can have a baby. Don't try not to put a condom on. You're going to be pregnant in 8 months. Or you're going to be pregnant in a couple of days, maybe that night. Never mind. Be quiet, Muffy. Don't talk about that. But you might be pregnant that night. But there's going to come out, a baby's going to come out in 9 months. So there's a DNA exchange. And what is DNA? DNA is information. So your brain is firing on all cylinders. And what is it doing at that moment? It is giving forth your DNA. It is pushing out your DNA and saying, oh, this is who I am right now. Right now, this is me. This is my skin color. This is my hair color. This is my attitude. This is how I feel right now. It is literally exchanging a DNA exchange. And don't worry, we're going to get to the slut shaming and all that stuff later. But first, we have to have a basis for information. This is why I say we have to begin to think about these things more complex, because it is not something that is happening in a bubble. It is happening because other things are happening. So that's the first thing. You are having an exchange of your DNA. The second thing is you are exchanging your aura. What is your aura? Your aura is your spirit, your soul, your persona, your personality. A lot of people talk about spirit and think it's like this mystic ghost thing. It's not. It is your personality. You have a personality of fearfulness. You have a personality of success. You have a personality of whatever your persona is right now. You are making an exchange of persona with this person and emotion with this person. That's why sometimes if you're having deadbeat sex, you get done and you feel dead. You feel like, why did I do that? Should I have done that? Because not only are you, if you're having dead sex, then the person who's you're having sex with is likely also having dead sex, and then you both feel dead afterwards. Or if you are in a beautiful, loving, kind, mutually beneficial relationship, then the exact opposite is happening. You have sex and you feel revived. You feel like you can take on the world. You feel like I've just expanded this because it's a giving and receiving. We forget. We forget because we want to not acknowledge that you are male and I am female, and therefore there is certain physicalities that come along with having sex, which means I'm a female. So my whole physical anatomy is shaped in a way in which I am to receive. And a male is a male. His whole physical anatomy is shaped in a way that he is to give. But there is a common happening of giving and receiving between two people that is happening here. You are giving off your DNA, your energy, your emotion, your spirit. That person is also giving off the very same thing to you. So this is more than just physical. And this is one of the problems that we have while we walk around like we should be rabid dogs. You are not supposed to be a rabid dog because you literally, which is why many black people are walking around depleted. Which is why many black men and women couples cannot seem to get it together, because you are having these sexual experiences where your brain is on fire, literally. Literally, when you can look up the brain scans. There are videos on YouTube that will show you the brain scans of what happens when a male and a female have orgasm or ejaculation. Everything ignites. Everything. And I was up late. I was up till 4 a.m. because I needed to make sure all my research was on point. And one of the things I found was this limbic system, which I didn't even know exists. But it's a system that exists in your brain that basically controls your memories, your brain plasticity. The hippocampus is one of the structures in your brain that ignites whenever you are learning something new. But when you are in a sexual experience, it just like explodes. And the crazy thing about the hippocampus is, I'm going to read you this because I kept this up on purpose. It says the hippocampus is one site in the brain where new neurons are made from adult stem cells. This process is called neurogenesis and is the basis of one type of brain plasticity. So it's not surprising that this is a key brain structure for learning new things. Connections made in the hippocampus also help us associate memories with various senses. The association between Christmas and the scent of gingerbread would be forged here. The hippocampus is also important for spatial orientation and our ability to navigate the world. So if your hippocampus is on fire when you are having a sexual experience, and it is literally responsible for creating these almost burns on the brain between sensation and emotion and person and physical and emotional, then not only are you exchanging, but you are creating a memory blueprint on your brain of this person that you are exchanging sexual intimacy with. Think about that on a deeper level. You're having relationship with this person. You're having sexual intimacy with this person. And that person at that point of orgasm or ejaculation has the ability to imprint themselves, their smell, their touch, their taste on your brain. And we think it's okay to go out and have sex with 5 different people just because. That's 5 different imprints on your brain of that person. You ever have sex with somebody and you can't get their smell off of you? You ever have sex with somebody and you can't stop thinking about them because they are literally creating an implant in your brain? at that moment. So now that we've created the basis for that, and if you just now started watching this video, stop, go back, rewind, because you'll take everything I'm about to say out of context. Because everything I'm about to say is based on the basis of what I just talked about in the science and history of sexual behavior in not only in the United States, but in humanity. So then we can talk about slut shaming. First of all, most people don't even know what the word slut means. Slut has nothing to do with sex. Go and look up the foundation of the word slut. Slut is literally a slovenly, dirty woman. When the word first started being used in early European history, it was being used to describe women who were dirty. They didn't clean their houses. They didn't take care of their kids. They went outside without washing their butts. That's what that is talking about. What we are talking about is whoring. And I bet you if we change the word to whore shaming instead of slut shaming, we would be having a whole different conversation. But this is the problem with Black people sometimes, because we get involved with movements and ideologies that we've not done the historical study of. White women have a right to be talking about whore and slut shaming. You know why? Because that was has been a part of their culture forever. That they've been forced into whoring and slutting themselves, or I can't say slutting because that's not what slutting means. They've been forced into whoring themselves since the beginning of European history. They have a right to talk about that. That is their agenda. It's not ours, because that's not our history. It became our history once we got on American shores and we decided to make ourselves equivalent with white women, which we are not. We are not equivalent with white women. White women are not equivalent with us. Sure, we share the same body structure, but our histories are different. I'm not going to sit here and tell any sister that I know and love that it's okay for her to go out and have sex with 50 million men and feel good about herself. Because I know the scientific and historical basis for that in our society. And I'm not okay with it. I'm not okay with it when I know that if my sister goes out there and has 5 sexual partners in the next 5 months, that them men are leaving an imprint on her brain, and that she is aligning herself with the sexual dysfunction in the history of Europeanhood that has nothing to do with where we are supposed to go as Black people. Why would I do that? Why would I say that? Why would I make that okay for her? And then sit up in her face and tell her that's okay. It's not, because I've been there, because I've been promiscuous. And I know what that does to a Black woman's soul. It doesn't make us feel good. It makes us feel like we're not worth anything. It makes us feel like we deserve to be treated that way. So no. Is slut shaming wrong? Quote unquote. I'll call it whore shaming. Is it wrong? Absolutely. Absolutely. Because we're not taking into perspective the historical things that have happened to women on American shores when we do that. We're not taking into perspective the fact that that woman is probably sleeping around because she didn't have a father, or she didn't have anybody to make her feel like she was worth or of value. And so she acted in that way because that was her only way of seeking out and seeing and being loved. So we have to begin to call a spade. But before we can do that, we have to understand the scientific and historical premise for which those things are based. We let Amber Rose create a whole movement and then jumped on this bandwagon, and we don't even really know what it's about. We're making assumptions about what it's about. Well, don't tell her that she can't. No, you can't do what a man can do. You can't, because you have a different anatomy than what a man has. And it's going to have consequences for you. And some of y'all are not going to like that I'm saying this, and that's okay. But this is something that I have to address because I have sons. And for the women who have sons, a large part of this you are in control of. Because we also do the same thing with our sons. We fail to slut shame them, which is we let them have 5 girls calling the house at one time, even though we know that at least one of those sisters is sitting somewhere with a broken heart. So we have to stop this thing where we take on the American sexual dysfunction and claim it as our own, and then act in ways that are out of alignment with the interests of our own communities. We have to begin to ask ourselves why we don't have communities. Is it all white supremacy? Or is some of it the dysfunction that we continue to allow to exist in our own communities? We talk about the way our young ladies dress as if it is objective. This is another thing that they've done so well to us, is they've made us people who objectify instead of recognizing that we are a part of this world. That means we are subjective to it. We are subjective to the natural laws and the moral codes of this universe. And yes, it has them. I hate when people say the world is a bad place. The world is not a bad place. God made this earth for us to live in as happy human beings. We've made it a bad place. We make it a bad place when we allow our young girls to go out into these streets and tell them it's okay for them to be out here twerking and working, work. I mean, come on, y'all. We got to do better. We have to. Because this is not normal. It's normal for other folks because this is their normalcy. It's not normal for us, which is why we suffer so badly under the guise of Western culture. And this is why they're suffering so badly now under the guise of Western culture, because they're not checking their own culture. But we need to begin to check it when it shows up in our communities, because it's not good. It's not a good look, as they would say. So when we're talking about slut shaming, quote unquote, or like I like to call it, whore shaming, what we have to begin to talk about is, why does this exist? Why is this even a movement that exists? Why is it even necessary to talk about shaming women for behaviors that they are engaging in because they are hurt? And that's the reality of most of the sexual dysfunction we engage in. We're doing it because we're hurt, because we are injured in the inside, and we don't have the courage to look inside and say, I'm doing this because I am hurt. And then we don't have the courage to do the work that helps us to get past the hurt. So we've got to begin to be honest with ourselves. Yesterday in the Pittsburgh Brown Mamas group, a lot of the women were talking about this Cutesies movie. And I think we really have to begin, when we're thinking about this movie, which I have not watched and I will not watch. I'll be honest, I'm not giving it the time of day. Because regardless of whether or not it was a coming of age story, my thought process is somebody let their daughter get up there on a movie set and let people put cameras up their ass. Not with that. Regardless of whether it was to teach a lesson or not, there's other ways to teach lessons. TV is not the only way to teach a lesson, and it could be said that it's the worst way to teach a lesson. Because it's not happening in a real context. And if something's not happening in real context, can you really relate it to real life? That's always my question. Anything that's happened on TV is a distortion of what is actually happening in reality. And yes, art can reflect life. This is true. And the vast majority of our art does reflect life. But that all art doesn't need to be sad. Because sometimes it's enough to just look at your damn life. I drive every day. I see young girls. I see them twerking. I see them posting with videos. You can go on any TikTok or Instagram and put in hashtag hoe, and you can see what you want to see. You don't need a movie to show you that. You can see it if you're looking for it. So I just want to get back on course here and talk about how this is how we as parents need to begin to react to the sexual dysfunction that is happening in our culture. And we might as well call it our culture, because we need to begin to embrace the fact that we are American, because we've been bred to be American. And if you missed the first half of this video, like I said before, if you missed this first half of this video, don't take what I say out of context. Go back and watch. Go back and watch, because I set up a frame for which to say what I'm saying now. How should we begin to respond to this in our parenting? We have to go back to ritualizing these behaviors. I talked about this before. Where is the ritual of dating? Is it even a ritual? Does it exist in your household? Or is everybody just allowed to go date and form their own structure around it and decide for themselves what it should look like, be like, feel like, act like? It shouldn't. If you're going to allow your teenager to date, which I don't think you should, honestly, I don't believe in teenagers dating, because a dating is a relationship. And a relationship, I actually went through this in a Brown Mama Mindset, what's it called? What are they called? Seminar that I just did this week. Relationships aren't real. What we should be engaging in is male female alliances, because relationships are based on temporary relation and magnetism. They are not based on contracts. They are not based on commitment. They are not based on codes of conduct. They are based on how I relate to you in that moment. And if I relate to you nice now, then hopefully I'll relate to you nice later. That's not real. So if you're out here allowing your teenager to engage in relationship and there's no structure, there's no form around it, and you haven't even developed a structure and a form for the way that you are dating, then what the hell? You shouldn't expect nothing but dysfunction, because you're putting out dysfunction, so you're going to get dysfunction. So what does that need to look like? This is just my opinion. It needs to look like supervision. If you're allowing your teenager, your young adult, to engage in relations with folks, other people's folks, how are you supervising that? Is he or she allowed to have 3 different boyfriends and girlfriends at one time? And why the hell is that okay? And I'm specifically talking to the moms who got sons. Like, is that, why are you letting that go down? And then you want to ha-ha and kiki that he's a player. No, that's nasty. That's who we should really be slut shaming, because if we would slut shame the boys instead of slut shaming the girls, we wouldn't have this problem. That's just what's real. And if we would teach the girls to ritualize their sexual behaviors, which means when you are getting ready for sex, there are steps to this thing. There is an environment that has to be present. And if he's not providing it, then he's not good enough for you. That's just what's real. But we want to be like, oh no, they can do what they want to do, and they're growing adults, and we have to let them experience what? Hold them? No, that's not an experience I want my children to have. I don't want my children to be wanton with their sexual energy, because I understand the brain implications of that. I understand the heart implications of that. I understand the emotional implications of that. So should you be letting your daughter walk around with her ass and her belly and her titties out? No, because you're teaching her she doesn't have to ritualize those things. You're teaching her she can just do what she wants. And not only are you teaching her she can do what she wants, but you're teaching her that the consequences are not that great, because the actions are not that great, when the consequences are massive. The consequences are young black girls in suicide, which the rates have gone up, the more we engage in this wanton sexual dysfunction. So what is it? Is there great consequences to sexual deviance, or are the consequences small and we can just let them continue to dress like that? Because the reality is that if there's a uniform for everything, everything has a uniform. See, a lot of this problem is that people don't know history. There's that movie, The Devil Wears Prada. And one of the best parts of that movie is when the white woman says, everything you've ever worn has been chosen for you. We utilize clothing to identify social status, which is why when you get a new job, what do? You get new clothes. We use clothing to identify actions and behaviors. A construction worker wears a certain set of clothes. This is why you can go to Burlington and then go to Anne Klein and the clothes look completely different. Because these people are not only different from you in terms of socioeconomic status, but they're also different from you in terms of the activities they're engaging in on a day-to-day basis. So no, this information ain't going to feel good. It's going to feel ugly. You're not going to like it. You might even say, I don't like Muffy Mendoza no more. Oh, well. Because the reality is, if we're going to continue to allow our daughters and our sons to behave in ways that are reckless, then we're only asking for more reckless behavior in our communities. So we have to decide what that's going to look like, what that's going to be like. Nobody's going to decide it for us. And there ain't going to be no magic wand, poof, no more slut shaming, and that's going to disappear. It's not going to disappear. It's going to stay right here with us. And then 5, 10, 15, 20, 34 decades down the line, we're going to be wondering why we're either in the same damn place we are today or it's 10 times worse. So these are all things we need to consider. These are things we need to consider as we raise our children. These are things we need to consider as we implement new rituals and routines and structures in our households. These are things we need to consider as we look at our broader society and make determinations about what we want to engage in and what we don't want to engage in. So that's pretty much my message today on sexual dysfunction. Understand what sex is before you start talking about slut shaming. Understand what the historical culture around the sexual activity that exists between the humans in your neck of the woods is before you make determinations about how sex should be had. And furthermore, examine your own household. Is there sexual dysfunction happening in your household? And that's not to shame you, but is it happening? Because the first step to being able to fix something is being able to actually acknowledge that it's occurring. And a lot of us won't even acknowledge that it's occurring, that there is sexual dysfunction and deviance happening in our household that has nothing to do with utilizing sexual energy in the proper way that it should be utilized. And the proper way that sexual energy should be utilized is like the lotus flower. It should be an opening once in a while in order to express the ultimate energy that you have access to in your body. Sexual energy is the most powerful energy you have access to in your physical being. There is nothing that compares to it. So why would you do that with anybody at any time for any reason? And I would venture to say, if you're not willing to accept this information, it's because you are being sexually deviant and you just don't want to admit that that's the truth. So, yeah, that's what I have today. I felt like this message was important to talk about as we enter the end of the year, and so many people are really reflecting on their lives and reflecting on, what they've done this year, because sex is the driving force of humanity. It's the thing that helps us procreate, and keep moving. So we need to talk about it. We need to talk about it more seriously in more complex ways. So thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for your time, for your ears. I appreciate you. You can hear more about this topic. I'm going to be uploading the Brown Mama Blueprint podcast today, and I'll be talking a little bit more about this issue, going a little bit deeper, or I might not. I may and I may not. I'm going to be interviewing Latrenda Sherrill and Elise Pinchback Johnson about the current state of education in America, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my own personal life, which I do on the Brown Mama Blueprint podcast. So make sure that you go onto Apple Podcasts and subscribe. You can listen to some of the old episodes, and the new episode will be there for you tomorrow morning. All right, y'all, have a great day. Make sure you listen. If you're going to listen, if you just joined in, you need to listen from the beginning. Do not go to the middle, because you ain't going to understand. You're going to take stuff out of context. So, all right, y'all, have a great day. Peace.